The whole world knows about the Holocaust and German Nazi genocide of World War II. Now. An ideology which led to the industrial slaughter of millions, an evil without parallel. But what if the Holocaust could have been, if not stopped, at least delayed? What if we in the West had known about the gas chambers, known about the burial pits, known about the mass shootings whilst they happened? Here's the thing. We did know. We were warned. And we did nothing.
This film is the story of a man trapped in the center of that horror. A man who sacrificed his family, his freedom, and ultimately his life to warn the world about the evils of Nazism and communism. His name is Witold Pilecki. Witold Pilecki was born in 1901 into a deeply patriotic Polish family. And when Poland was reborn after 123 years, Witold, like so many other Poles, was determined to make the best of its newfound freedom. He married Maria and they had 2 children, Zofia and Andrzej. And when his country called, he came. He fought in the September 1939 campaign against Germany, and then when Poland fell, he joined the resistance.
A name kept coming up, Auschwitz. More and more Polish civilians were being sent there, but nobody really knew what was happening. So Pilecki decided to volunteer to enter the camp using an assumed identity of Tomasz Selefinski.
Packed into cattle cars with hundreds of other Poles, Pilecki was to have a ringside seat to Adolf Hitler's evil plans to reduce Poland's population from 35 to a few million through starvation, torture, and camps.
Blinded by the spotlights, shoved, hit, kicked, savaged by the dogs. We found ourselves in conditions unlike anything any of us had ever experienced.
As they jump off the cattle cars, the SS order one prisoner to run and then shoot him. They then shoot another 10 prisoners in punishment for the escape attempt. They're warned that if they last longer than 6 weeks in this camp, that must mean that they're thieves and they'll also be shot. They're marched through the now infamous gates Arbeitsmarktfrei, still unsure of what fresh hell awaits them. Stripped, shaved, beaten, killed at random. They're given numbers. Pilecki's is 4859. And then they're fed starvation rations and put to work on heavy manual labour.
It seemed like a never-ending nightmare. Sometimes, when you had no strength left and there was work to be done, an hour seemed like a century, but weeks passed quickly. Perhaps there was something wrong with either time itself or our sanity. Our sanity was not the same as that of other people back on Earth. The men we were dying.
Pilecki immediately started setting up the camp's underground resistance, swearing each member to serve Poland and the underground. They shared food, they tried to protect the weak, they did their best to keep morale up, but nothing could stop the bestiality at Auschwitz.
In Block 11, Palich, a particularly enthusiastic torturer, would hunt children. He told girls to run around a closed yard and would shoot them, killing them like rabbits. He would snatch children from their mother's embrace and smash their little heads against walls or stones. A true degenerate, tears and death followed him. Having committed such a heinous crime, he would come out smiling, handsome and polite, calmly smoking a cigarette.
In the meantime, the Polish Home Army was quickly becoming the largest resistance organisation in the whole of Europe, a state within a state, with its government in exile in London. Back in the camp, Pilecki decided that conditions here were so bad that it needed to be bombed. He briefed a prisoner who was being released, Tadeusz Burski, with precise instructions to send to London on how to bomb it.
In Warsaw, the Polish resistance wrote up the report, stating that, should the prisoners die in the attack, it would be a relief given the conditions. The November 1940 report was smuggled across occupied Europe by a network of Polish couriers, ending up in neutral Spain. By December 10th, it was flown to London, and the request to bomb the camp was put directly to the British Royal Air Force, and was rejected.
I'm here by the so-called Wall of Death, where prisoners were taken to be shot. In this madness, Pilecki's resistance had no choice but to try and hold on. They watched as the Germans started to industrialize the killing, injecting prisoners directly into the heart with poison. Then Soviet prisoners started to enter into the camp after the June invasion of Russia by Germany in 1941. One day, sick Polish prisoners are taken in a selection and disappear. Then, that night, Witold and his comrades hear endless screams from this building, Block 11. It turns out that the SS have taken the sick Polish prisoners and hundreds of Soviet POWs, crammed them into the cellars of this building, locked them in, and then dropped Zyklon B through these entrances. The next morning, Witold is grabbed by a Polish nurse, Tadeusz Słowiaczek, who tells him how he'd been ordered to remove those bodies.
The cell doors were wide open, and in the dim light of a single bulb they could see the contents of each room. The dead were so tightly pressed into each space that they still stood, limbs locked together, eyes bulging, mouths gaping, teeth bared in silent screams. Their clothes were shredded in places where they must have torn at one another, and several had bite marks. Wherever the flesh was exposed, the skin had a dark bluish hue. Scattered on the floor were little blue pellets of what some of the nurses recognized as the delousing agent Zyklon B. The place already stank of decomposing flesh.
In 1941 and 1942, Pilecki sent out a series of reports, for example through freed prisoners like Czesław Wąsowski, detailing the crematoria here at Auschwitz I, working day and night to burn thousands of Polish and Russian bodies. He also explained how Auschwitz I was being turned at Birkenau into a super complex Auschwitz II, to house first Soviet POWs and then Jewish civilians from all across Europe. He told one prisoner, Vincente Gavron, to escape the camp, explaining that he must tell them about the murder of the Soviet POWs, but the most important thing is the mass killing of the Jews.
Pilecki's report on the gassings was put onto microfilm and given to a Swedish courier who travelled from Warsaw to Berlin and then flew to Stockholm, reaching London in late November. It confirmed what the British government were also receiving from their Enigma intercepts about mass shootings in the East, but again was dismissed. The Polish government in exile were desperate to pass on Pilecki's reports and their own wider intelligence to London and Washington. They put together a 750-page book, The Black Book of Poland, with photos and eyewitness accounts of over 400,000 killings. They also released another pamphlet, The Mass Extermination of Jews in German-occupied Poland in 1943. Both publications were presented at the highest levels in London and Washington and met with little reaction.
For the Jewish prisoners inside this barracks hut in Birkenau, Auschwitz II, the gas chambers were no story, they were a daily living reality. The Poles sent another messenger, Jan Karski, to Washington. He'd already been inside the ghetto in occupied Warsaw and inside a transit camp to Belzec concentration camp. In America, Karski met with the American president, and he later reported that Roosevelt didn't ask him a single question about the Jews. Karski then went on to meet a Supreme Court Justice, Felix Frankfurter, himself Jewish. And Frankfurter said to him, "It's not that I'm saying you're lying, it's just that I can't believe you." Again and again, the American government chose not to believe what the Polish underground were telling them. Instead, they actively suppressed media reports about the Holocaust, dismissing them as wild rumors based on Jewish fears. Meanwhile, Pilecki was doing his best to keep the resistance active and optimistic. His main goal was to persuade his superiors to attack their camp or allow him to launch a camp-wide rebellion. The resistance even managed to kill the worst SS offenders by infecting them with typhus-laden lice. They built and hid a secret radio. But above all else, they tried to keep accurate numbers on the killings of Jewish civilians. In April 1943, Pilecki decided it was finally time to escape the camp. Perhaps he could persuade the world to do something about Auschwitz.
Together with his friends Jan Redze and Edek Czesielski, he got a job in a bakery outside the camp, using a copy of a key and a wrench, and, almost caught in the act, they ran out into the night with shots firing behind them. Stumbling in the dark, they came to the nearby river and had to get across, but the only boat they found was locked to a bolt. Incredibly, the same wrench they'd used to escape the bakery also fitted the bolt lock perfectly. They sailed across and ran into the woods. Witold Pilecki, after 947 days in Auschwitz, was free.
The pines whispered, gently waving their huge tops. Scraps of blue sky could be seen between the tree trunks. The dew shone like little jewels on the bushes and grass. In places, the sun's rays broke through. The silence, far from the roar of humanity, far from men's scheming. What a contrast with the camp in which I felt I had spent 1,000 years.
The three men made it to Nowowiśniec, to this house. Now, remember, this whole time in the camp, Pilecki had been using someone else's name, Tomasz Serafiński. So imagine his surprise when he got to this house and met the owner, someone who was also in the underground, who was Tomasz Serafiński, the very person he'd been impersonating. And it was here that Pilecki wrote. He wrote appeals to attack the camp. He wrote reports to send to his superiors. And I think above all else, he wrote because he needed to deal with the trauma of what he'd been through.
I've come to the Museum of the Home Army in Krakow, Poland, where you can actually see the original report that Pilecki wrote after his escape and learn more about the Polish Home Army's fight for freedom and to tell the world about the Holocaust. It's not an exaggeration to say that Witold Pilecki's first-hand reports about Auschwitz are some of the most important documents of the entire Second World War. They are his eyewitness testimony of man's inhumanity to man. But Pilecki's story doesn't have a happy ending. Poland was taken over at the end of the war by communists. Pilecki went back to Poland to continue the fight and was finally betrayed, arrested, taken to this prison in Warsaw and tortured, and then sentenced to death. Witold Pilecki was shot in the back of the head by communists in May 1948.
It's estimated that more than 1.1 million people died in Auschwitz. Jews, Poles, Soviet POWs, and countless other minorities. We'll never know how many would have been saved, and how many of their children and children's children would be alive today if the world had listened to Captain Pilecki and his brave comrades in the Polish resistance. But one thing we should know by now is that if another Pilecki speaks to us, we should listen.